Welcome to Off the Record, a behind-the-scenes look at the making of Skeptical and Investigative Podcast. My name is Neeli Faulkner, and with me is my friend and teammate, associate producer, and all things cool and groovy, Emily Christy, who's here to talk to me about what didn't make it into the episodes and give a behind-the-scenes look at the case like never seen before. Today, we're talking about season 1, episode 1, called He Just Knew Everything. So if you haven't listened to that episode, we would highly recommend that you do so before you listen to this, because Skeptical is one story told in sequential order. So make sure you listen chronologically, then come back here and get the inside scoop. What do you think, Emily? I almost said you get Christy.
Do you know how many times a day I get called Christy, Emily? When my last name was Bailey, I was Bailey all the time. I got 3 first names. It's wonderful.
Well, you could always have my name. People will just mess it up just for fun.
Nelly, yeah. Neeli.
Neeli.
Yep. Neeli.
Yep.
You never
There's
know.
so many I get. Yeah. Anyway, what's up?
Happy to be here and excited to talk about season 1, episode 1.
So for listeners who may have listened to what we used to call Beyond the Pod, we are revamping. Okay. We do.
Bring it back.
Bring it back, y'all. I feel like Nelly Furtado is going to come in any minute now with Timberland. But we used to call this Beyond the Pod. We do another podcast now, not Emily and myself, but me and Whitney Skapecki, who is a co-host for a different podcast that we do. And we entitled those episodes Beyond the Pod, and that was not quite something I thought about prior to naming those. So we are rebranding this, I should say, and we're going to call it Off the Record, and we're going to go into everything that I didn't narrate in season 1 of Skeptical to kind of answer some questions and talk about the making of and behind the scenes. So I'm really excited about this. We had started, like I said, we had started this and then we kind of got off track with other projects that we did. So just for listeners to be aware, we are going to do this episode and we're going to go through all 12 episodes. And Emily has lots of questions for me that I have no idea what they are. And I'm really excited to see what questions that she has. Put me on the spot here.
In the hot seat. No. So I've had some friends, colleagues listen as well and re-listen so that we can kind of aggregate some questions. So maybe we also ask listeners once this gets kicked off if they want to submit questions, because I know that we don't have time to go through everything as we make it through the episodes. And there's so much to this case. Okay, so first and foremost, I think a lot of our listeners will relate to our obsession with the true crime genre. So Serial was definitely the first podcast that I was hooked on. And I remember being so angry at the end when she was like, I don't know. And not understanding kind of the true crime podcast genre. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? Why don't you have the answers? But I guess my question is, how did you decide to start Murder Creek Media? I know that you teased it a little bit. And do you want to talk a little bit about what event you went to? And was that really the catalyst and why?
Yes. I tell this story all the time. As a matter of fact, I told this story at 12 o'clock today when we did an onboarding interview for one of our volunteers that is coming onto the team, and we kind of gave a background. That person mentioned a different media company. They talked about Skeptical, and I was not Skeptical, Serial, which was also kind of a catalyst for me. I listened, it was a catalyst for a lot of people that listen to true crime. I listened to Serial I binged it on a couple of flights getting to Reno for the Reno air races. And I remember I was coming into Reno, the plane was landing, and I was listening to the final episode of Serial when she's like, hey, I don't know. And I was pissed off. I'm like you. I was totally convinced that she was just going to be like, yeah.
Similar Vegas stories, because I had already listened to it, but my husband and I were driving to California from Texas to pick up some furniture. And it was the first time that I got him to listen to a podcast. And I knew what was coming because I'd already listened to it. And we were leaving the Grand Canyon on the way to Vegas. And he just pulled over and said, are you kidding me? Seriously? She doesn't tell you who does it?
And, I was mad at that point.
Oh, yeah.
But now that I have written and created Skeptical and gone through it, I see why she didn't. And it was kind of a full circle moment for me as I got to the last episode And I have, I'm not going to ruin it for people that haven't listened to it, but I realize now why she said what she did. So it's funny that you even brought that up, because I walked through those motions. But let's talk about the event real quick that led to the creation of Murder Creek Media and of this podcast in general. So, and I talk about this all the time. I'm not kidding. Every single time I talk to somebody, I talk about this and how it came to be, because I want people to understand that this was really a passion project. That was why it came to be, because it was a passion project, but it was also fun to do. So one of our other team members, Chantrice, she was a former coworker of mine, and we would listen to podcasts all day long at work. And, she was a true crime buff like me. And we would talk about a podcast called Up and Vanished. This is not promoted, by the way. This is just organic reach that we're going to give them here, which is totally fine because I love them. But we listened to Up and Vanished. And at the time, Tenderfoot TV produces that podcast. They weren't really big names, I guess, in the podcasting space. And so we were listening to each episode as it was coming. And it was a story of an investigation into a Georgia cold case of a teacher by the name of Tara Grinstead. And the host, Payne Lindsay, walked through just kind of how we did with Skeptical. And to put this in perspective, we were doing this at the same time. Like, Payne Lindsay did it, and very shortly after I did it. Now, there's a couple of things that happened in my life that, I couldn't go the same way, and I'll talk about that later. But it just felt like really raw and authentic, and, you were following the story in real time, and it was fun, right? So Up and Vanish, season 1 blew up. Payne actually ended up helping, in a way, I guess, to solve that case. And someone has since been prosecuted for it. And so, they had great success, which is wonderful. But because of their great success, they had a live podcast show in Athens, Georgia. And at the time, Chantrice and I were in Calhoun County, Alabama. So it was not too far of a drive to get to Athens. And so I asked her, do you want to go to this podcast show? We bought tickets and we went, and we had the most amazing time. But as we were sitting there, and if you go to my Medium account, actually, and I think on my Substack, I actually have an article about this. I have a couple of pictures from that trip where we were, at the venue, and they're sitting there, Payne and Maurice Godwin, who's also featured on that podcast, and another guy. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, these are just regular people. I don't know why I put them on like such a pedestal when we were listening, but in my mind, I thought, if these people can do it, so can I. And Chantrice and I got in the car, and we were on the way back. It was a couple hour drives back. And I told her that night, I said, I'm going to make my own podcast. And she just kind of giggled, and she's like, I'm sure you are, because she knows me. She's like, I know you'll stubborn ass will. So I got home that night, and I came home and put my MacBook on my bed, and I Googled wrongfully convicted Alabama, because obviously I was in Alabama. And that is where I found the case of Daniel Blan. And that I talk about that in the first episode of Skeptical. So it all stemmed from my love of true crime. Listening to Serial was a big inspiration for this podcast. Obviously, it's, written very similarly to the way that the first season of Serial was. And then from the creators at Tenderfoot TV, which is based out of Atlanta, to kind of bring it to the southern sphere, I guess you should say, that I wanted it to be cases that were here, that weren't often covered, and just have that raw, authentic feel, just like Up and Vanish had. So that's really the inspiration for it. Now, as far as the topic of wrongful conviction, I have always been passionate about wrongful conviction. I watched a movie, I talk about this too in the first episode, of The Life of David Gale, which is a movie with Kevin Spacey. He's been canceled since then, so like don't judge me on this, okay? But it was
did we cancel him a couple years ago?
We did, yeah, he's gone. But we did that movie really helped to kind of spark awareness in my mind. It's not, I don't think it's based on a true story or anything, but just the story of it really got me interested in that. So I follow a lot of different innocence organizations. I follow a lot of exonerees that speak out. I'm really interested in covering criminal justice stories, especially in Alabama, because, our prison system is a hot mess and there's so much that's going on with all that. And so it all just seemed to kind of come together. So hopefully listeners hear the story and they realize that we weren't in it for clicks, if you get where I'm going with that.
Not for profit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. We want to eventually make a profit. Okay.
Right now we're a bunch of working moms.
That's right. Yeah.
And a dad.
But that's several. Yeah. I guess a couple dads. Yeah. Our team has grown so much, but that's how it was started. So hopefully one of these days, hopefully Payne Lindsay listens to this and realizes that when I say that his story and his team's story changed my life, I'm not kidding. It really did. It altered the course of my life significantly. And I am forever grateful for that, because I would not be here and be interacting with the people that I'm interacting with and working the cases that we're working without doing that. So little butterfly effect there, I guess.
I love a good butterfly effect. So speaking of wrongful conviction, do we have an update on I'm totally going to butcher this, Jeffrey Descovich Foundation for Justice? That is a mouthful. Foundation for
Jeffrey Descovich Foundation for Justice.
Thank you. And I know that we had reached out to him a couple of years ago, but how many people they've been able to reach and help and support by chance? Do you still keep in touch with Jeffrey?
So we are friends on Facebook, and he is still doing his thing. I'm actually going to Google it right now. I typed in Jeffrey. It popped in Jeffrey Epstein. Oh my God.
No, thank you. Wrong one.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about him. So Jeffrey Descovich, he is a public speaker. He teaches. He, got his law degree. Is helping all kinds of people. And let me look, because I do follow him. I think they changed the name of it now to Descovich Foundation.
It was challenging for me to get up.
I bet.
It's been a long day.
Their website says that the Descovich Foundation just exonerated Andrew Krivik. I hope I said that name correctly. After he spent 24 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Wow. It doesn't say what they have done, but the fact that they were such a young organization and they had already exonerated that many people, that is a significant accomplishment. That's why I included that information in the first episode, because I just thought, wow, that's something to be proud of.
It is, which was awesome. And so hopefully we can send some love their way as well to help and support. So that also kind of leads into, wrongful convictions can be, as you said in the podcast, coerced confession. It could be altered or missing evidence, false witnesses, etc. But going back to the coerced confessions, I think in the pod we said 1 out of 4 confessions seems to be a false confession, or you have a 25% chance. And that seems super high. And I know, because obviously I am a true crime consumer, as well as, I guess, a producer.
That's right.
I guess my question is, I know there have been discussions about the Reid technique, where you're using force, intimidation, lying, manipulation to facilitate a confession, which has been proven to show that people are obviously under duress and confessing to these crimes that they didn't commit. Has there been, I guess, another technique that has been nationally or standardized across law enforcement agencies? Or have you spoken to any law enforcement officers that might share a little bit of insight about the techniques that they're trained to use in interrogations and detectives?
No, but let me tell you this. And a lot of times when we talk about wrongful conviction and wrongful conviction awareness and the science behind it, especially concerning coerced confessions, I should say, I don't find a lot of law enforcement officers that are willing to even speak about the fact that it is possible to have someone who is wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
Now, when I say this out loud, people that are listening automatically assume that I'm anti-law enforcement or
We back the blue.
right. It it is not that we are anti-law enforcement. It is that we are pro accountability. So, in my opinion, if one person is wrongfully convicted, that is 1,000 people too many. Okay. I take this very seriously. You know, we don't have to talk about the death penalty here, but a lot of people will talk to me about the death penalty and just assume things that are not true. But when you work in these cases like we do, and you have the information that we have, which, you know, we do partner with several law enforcement agencies, you really see how little evidence is used many times to convict someone. So when it comes to coerced confessions, and that's really there's Bodie.
Hi, Bodie.
I was about to say he's gonna lay right there in his little spot, make an appearance. He's my sidekick. But anyway, when you see the little bit of evidence that is used and you talk about coerced confessions, it really puts things into perspective. But what I have yet to find is any of our law enforcement partners willing to speak about the possibility of making a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for someone to admit that they did make a mistake. I mean, in general, but it is very difficult for someone probably to accept themselves as having made a mistake. Do you get what I'm saying? When you say it out loud and you take accountability, you're letting other people know that, yes, you made a mistake. That aspect is hard enough. But admitting it to yourself is a whole different aspect. So you're not going to find that. Now, as far as, well, I don't want to say you're not going to find that. You're going to be hard pressed to find that. There are some law enforcement officers that realize that, hey, I put someone behind bars, or I put someone, you know, in line for the death penalty that doesn't deserve to be there, and it's based on false information. Or coerced information that maybe I didn't realize was coerced at the time. I thought, based on my training, that this was right. But now that I'm looking back on it, I realize it was a manipulation tactic. And I'm going to give you an example. You know, I love Dateline. Your girl is a huge Dateline fan. I just think all
Snapped.
I do like Snap too. But I love when they show police interrogation videos, and you can watch the body language of the officers that are in the room, or pay attention to how the questions are asked, or maybe, you know, they're there for over a course of so many hours, and the story completely changes from when they first go in to 6 or 7 hours later when they're there. And now that I work within the space that I do, I'm much more skeptical, pun intended, of those videos or those interrogation techniques. And I think that, I'm not saying like, hey, punish all law enforcement for this, but what I am saying is that there is an awareness aspect to this, to where the more people that understand that this is a possibility, that someone can give a false confession based on how their interrogation goes. Those are the kind of people that I would hope were on a jury if I was ever in the hot seat, or my son is ever in the hot seat, or my husband, or my mother, or somebody like that. That I would hope that there was someone that sat on a jury that would really use their critical thinking skills when talking about confessions. So I went off on a tangent there, but there's so much. I would probably have had to prepare for that question, because there's so much that goes into the science behind coerced confessions.
Absolutely. We can take that as a follow-up for our next episode if we want to circle back. But
That's right. That's right.
unscripted and raw. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so getting into the episode as well. Why do you think Danny would draw out a picture of how he would have killed Mike but still maintained his innocence? I mean, the If I Did It was a great comparison to the OJ book. But just curious on your thoughts on like what?
Well, the first time I saw that, the first time I saw that drawing, because that Josh and I that are, Josh is not on our team now, but he did help me a lot at the first part of Skeptical. We went to the Coosa County Courthouse, and I have a photo of this. I think I've shared on my social media a couple of times. There, we walked into a room. There's nothing in the room but a desk, and there's a box sitting on the table, like a file box.
Evidence box.
Yeah, it's an evidence box. Yeah. And there's only about this thick of amount of paperwork in there. So like if it was in a notebook, maybe an inch, possibly 2-inch notebook. And that was everything that was used to convict Daniel Blan. Everything. So thinking about that drawing and how significant that drawing was as we're sitting in that room and we're holding it and looking at it, it just was, I don't know, surreal to me because for me, I try to think about everything logically. So was it possible that he was speaking to someone and someone asked him to do a layout of the house and said, hey, if someone was in the house, where would have been like the best place to hide? Right. And so maybe he could have said, well, if you're in the house and you're in one of the back bedrooms, there's just a hallway right here. He would not have been able to see you from the recliner of where he was. I could see something like that happening. But the way that the story was presented by Bobby Casper was that this was the way that he described if he would have done it. Well, that changes my thinking. If someone murdered my father and you were talking to me about it, I would never, ever use the term, well, if it was me and I did it, I would have sat back here in his bedroom and popped out. I never would have used that. And so I don't know. I guess there's several different ways that you can look at it.
Sorry, now I've got to get back to my questions. Okay. Okay. I love Waffle House. You love Waffle House. We love Waffle House. So first of all, what's your hash brown order?
My hash brown order is smothered, covered, and topped.
Ooh, smothered, covered, and capped. I love a good mushroom. Okay. But all that being said, the police leaving the scene, that seems insane, especially as what we know now about protecting crime scene evidence and chain of command. And were there ever any other complaints about that police department for issues with their evidence and procedures?
So the police department in general, the Rockford Police Department had, to my knowledge, had not even experienced a homicide. So that was why they called in the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. And so those guys were very well versed in murders because they were handling it, different areas of the state. So should they have known not to leave the crime scene to go to Waffle House? Absolutely. Absolutely. I could be a frog on a log and I would know not to leave a crime scene and go eat at Waffle House and come back.
Unattended.
And that was why I opted to choose part of the recording between myself and my friend, Alan, who at the time that I spoke to Alan, he was a captain at the Anniston Police Department. Anniston had a very high crime rate at the time. And I want to say it was in like the top 5 for homicides in the state of Alabama. So, investigators in Anniston are very well versed on what they're talking about. And I don't want to say fun fact because it's not fun by any means, but if you go back and listen to the episode and Alan talks about, he gives an example and he says, when Freckman was shot, I don't know if you caught this, but he says, when Freckman was shot, So the person that he was talking about at the time was my brother-in-law. Okay.
Oh gosh.
My brother-in-law was an investigator with the Anderson Police Department. He was married to my sister. They're divorced now. And he was
But
an
he's
investigator.
still with us. Okay. Sorry, not to run the
Yeah.
story. Okay.
He is, yeah. But he was at a crime scene of a homicide where they had taped off the location, and the suspect returned to the scene as they were there. And Thomas would not let him through, and so he shot Thomas in the stomach. And he survived, okay? But that's why when Alan is talking about it, he says, you know, they would never leave the scene, meaning the original scene they would not have left, and then they had a secondary scene where Thomas was shot. And so in that case, they shot and killed the guy who shot Thomas, you know, officer returned fire or whatnot. But
yeah,
that's what they're talking about in there. But I didn't feel the little backstory part of that was significant enough to be included because it's unrelated to the Blan case. But I mean, since we're here off the record, but yeah, he's still alive. Although he and my sister are no longer together, he is still a law enforcement officer, and he's doing very well. Awesome. So shout out to Thomas if you're listening.
Hey, Thomas. Okay, and so looking back and listening to the appeals, does Daniel still have his original attorney, or did he fire his attorneys? Were there motions that they didn't do their job correctly based on not digging into the evidence and filing motions that seem like should have been filed? And again, I'm an armchair attorney. That's no loss.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? So Daniel had two attorneys originally at trial. One of them is now deceased, and the other one did not do any appeals work for him. You know, I think after the conviction, these were public defenders, okay? And so after the conviction, it was my understanding that he would have had to compensate the attorneys for whatever they did. And so I don't remember if he got to this or not, so I don't want to ruin it for everyone. But to answer your question, no, it was not his attorney. He later had different attorneys, and it's not unusual for people that are going through the appeals process and, you know, criminal court to go through several attorneys because it's hard to find a good criminal defense attorney, but especially in Alabama.
Well, I guess that this is something that I'd never thought of. So you get a public defender if you can't afford counsel, it will be, you know, afforded to you. But does that cover the appeals, or are you paying for your appeals out of pocket or fundraising and doing those things if you're convicted and then trying to go back and?
It's my understanding that you can have a public defender for your appeals. That you can file indigent if, you know, for like a Rule 32. I don't know as far as other motions what happens, but any defendant that's a good question. I've actually never thought of this, but any defendant that I've ever spoken with, make sure to try to find their attorney. I guess probably a good reason is that in the state of Alabama, you have a Rule 32 motion for post-conviction relief. And once you file that motion, if it is not successful, you can't just continue to use that same evidence from that Rule 32 over and over again. You really have like one shot at it. Mm-hmm. And so I can understand not wanting to risk, you know, giving that to a public defender when it is your freedom. So I don't know. We'll have to look at that. We'll have to talk about that in another episode. That's a good question.
That's all my questions.
Oh. Did you have people that you said listened and had questions? Were those some of their questions what you asked?
We peppered them in. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So shout out to my team at work.
Yeah. That your other work. Yeah. It's hard to go through and talk about off the record because we're only in episode 1 and there's so many things that happen after the fact that it's hard to remember, like I talked about It's been so long that even we have to go back through and listen to the episodes and be like, what did I say there? A lot of people that know me now don't necessarily know me for the work that I have done on Skeptical. A lot of people know me from some public accountability work that I have done here locally and through a separate podcast that Whitney Skapecki and I do called Make It Make Sense Alabama. So when people find me through the public accountability sphere, and then you tell them like, oh, well, this happened and this is actually what I'm passionate about and what I really should be known for, they'll get to asking you a bunch of questions. And so somebody was asking me about the case the other day, and I was like, man, I work so many cases now that I'm having trouble kind of remembering it. But I just think like if it ever got to a point where I had to go testify and answer a question, I'm like, man, I better have my ducks in a row.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited for for us to talk about the rest of these episodes so we can kind of rehash some of this stuff and to talk about other projects that we have coming up to where they're going to be in the same serial investigative technique that we've done for Skeptical, but just not focusing on wrongful conviction. Although we will have a Skeptical season 2, which will focus on a different case.
Yes. And are we still accepting volunteers?
Yes. Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. So Whitney and I were going over analytics the other day. And again, we're a very small independent company. Everything is fully self-funded. Okay. And so we don't really put our efforts into ads and things like that because it's an additional cost and we're just covering our other costs at the time. Right. So I told her, I said, well, I looked at the analytics for Skeptical and somebody must be pushing it somewhere. It must have appeared somewhere because we are getting some pretty good downloads to have no marketing for it. So today I get a volunteer. When people submit a volunteer application, we do an onboarding session with them via video chat. And I'm like, tell me about yourself, blah, blah, blah. And I asked her, where did you find us? And she said, oh, I listened to Skeptical. She said that, and here's the kicker. She's based in Germany.
Ooh, we're international now.
She's from the US, but she's currently living in Berlin, I think she said. And I was like, wow, okay. So Skeptical is getting some organic push in Germany. That's kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Shout out to our overseas listeners. And even those that are here, I always love to hear how people find us. Most of the time when people find us, it's because they go to Google and they type in true crime volunteer. That is one of the keywords that people find us on Google. So our volunteer page pops up, and that's a lot of times how they come across us, just organically. But yeah, it was really cool to hear somebody else say that they found us through Skeptical and went to our website and they wanted to help. Yeah.
We love that.
That's right. So we do have, I guess that's a good thing to say for somebody that doesn't know this. We do our team is fully volunteer, yourself included. We have over 25 volunteers from across the US and Germany now, apparently. And we accept volunteers on a rolling basis. And these different volunteers come in and they help us to investigate cases and to gather information, to do FOIA requests and all the things so that hopefully we can have a whole lot more content like Skeptical. But it's a full-time job without being a full-time job. So if you were interested in volunteering for Murder Creek Media, go to murdercreekmedia.com/volunteer and it'll tell you all the ways that you can help submit a volunteer application.
We'd love to have you.
All right. Well, if that's all the questions that you have, we will cut this one for today. That is it for today's episode of Off the Record. We will be back with more episodes for episodes 2 through 12 of Skeptical Season 1. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe wherever you are listening or watching. We are a super tiny independent media company with no corporate backing yet. So if you'd like to find ways to help support us, go to our website at murdercreekmedia.com and find ways to support our mission and our content. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks for having me, Niels.
Anytime. I'll see you again tomorrow so we can do episode 2.
Same time, same place.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.